Welcome, London. Welcome back to the Manish Tiwari Show. Maestro stands for the multicultural voice in the United Kingdom, in London, and for our communities. And today, we have someone very important with us in our studio. Ladies and gentlemen, friends, his name is Shaun Bailey, and he's standing for the mayoral seat of London. He stands for Conservative Party, and he's with us here today. Shaun, welcome to my show.
Thank you very much. Great to see you, and hello to all of your viewers.
Thanks a lot. Viewers, when I was researching about Shaun Bailey, I came across a lot of amazing facts, and my respect for this man has gone up. The fact is, we're living in a world where we're getting information from different sources. Some of it is never verified, and some of it is never qualified. So we're living in a world where information comes to us from different sources, and we're making choices based on bits and pieces of information. When I did my research, I found out that Shaun Bailey is someone who's self-made. He was born in a council house, raised by a single mom, but he turned his life around from being a homeless young man to someone who today stands up for the highest seat in this city. London is a city of dreams. For many of us, for millions of us, this is the greatest city in the world. This is where lives are made, and we see friends and family from every part of the globe. So for me, London represents something very, very unique in the entire world. It is an expression of the love of the universe as a human being, irrespective of your race or creed or the background you come from. So Shaun, my first question today would be, you standing for the mayoral candidate, and I'm sure you must have many reasons. You have chosen to be a member of the Conservative Party, you've been working with the party, you've been an advisor to the Prime Minister. I believe it was David Cameron. You were advisor to number 10 Downing Street. You have taken on many roles. You have led a charity as well. You worked with young people. And I also found out that you've been working in training cadets. You've been working in training young people. So there's a huge pool of experience you have. My first question would be, what is the one single reason, one burning reason which makes you take on this huge ambition to be the mayor of the city and to focus your life? I've seen in the last couple of years you've been campaigning actively. So what is that one single motivational point which makes you stand up for this post and fight for this post?
Firstly, thank you again for having me. I really welcome the opportunity. I think the first point is this: London needs a fresh start. For the last 4 years now, London's been moving in the wrong direction. If it's housing, if it's crime, if it's transport, I know London needs that fresh start. I spent a long time thinking about how we could have that start. So I put my head above the parapet and said, let me lead London on the right path. And the reason I want to do that is for you, for your children, for my children, for your grandparents, for my grandparents. We have to do more to make London safe. We have to do more to point London in the right direction. And this is about what kind of London do we want to give to our children in the future. That's why I'm running to be Mayor of London. Excuse me, can you repeat that for me, please?
Shaun, I was saying that you feel that you can make the difference by being the mayor. You will be able to make the difference for London.
Absolutely. I spend a lot of time sitting in front of Sadiq Khan because I'm already elected to the London Assembly, and he lied. And one day he lied so badly, I thought the safety of my children is at risk. I need to step up and get involved. I've seen how many young people in London want to buy a home, and he's failed to provide those homes. So I said, let me come up with a plan to provide those homes. It is about moving London in a fresh direction, a fresh start, as I'll always say. I'll ask your viewers this question: do they feel more prosperous than they did 4 years ago? Do they feel safer than they did 4 years ago? Does the tube system work any better than it did 4 years ago? The answer to all of those questions is no. So that's why I want to help London move forward. This isn't about me and my political career. There's lots of other things I could do, but I'm a Londoner and I want London to work. It's because I want every Londoner to have the opportunities that I've had. Remember, I came from a single parent, very poor family. My mum worked hard to feed us. She encouraged us to go to school. And when eventually I got to university, I was lucky and I made it happen. How many young people who start in that circumstance can say that they believe that will happen now? This is about hope. This is about the future of your children, my children. This is about London moving in a fresh direction.
Shaun, I buy into that. I mean, this is the city of hope, and I've seen people making a career, making their lives. Even the present mayor, if I can say, he seems to have come up from a very humble background. His father used to be a bus driver, and there's so many examples in this city. So I completely buy into what you're saying. This is a city where hope needs to be alive, not just for London, not just for United Kingdom, but for the whole world, because this is a beacon for the rest of the world where things can be changed, which leads in every front, from whether it be LGBTQ rights, human rights, whether it be for green activism, for every single thing, London is a beacon of hope. So I buy into that. But my next question is, and I noticed that there's something like a Star Wars helmet behind you. So you definitely, you seem to be the savior, or at least you hope in your heart that you're the savior. But my next question would be, you are with Conservative Party, and the history of politics in this country has been such that we see, or not me, but a lot of people from BA, ME, BAME communities would see Conservative Party as a party of imperial ambitions, of imperial past, not naturally aligned to the hopes and aspirations of people from Black and Asian origins. I mean, that's what a lot of people would say. And what do you have to say to them? Do you feel comfortable leading your battle, leading your fight from within this party, and being a member of Conservative Party? Do you think the party has changed to fully accept people like you? And does it give voice to multicultural communities which live in the United Kingdom and Great Britain?
So what I would say, firstly, people who feel like that, they're correct. They haven't made it up. The history of this country has definitely been colonial. But I think that's the entire country that needs to answer for that, not just the Conservative Party. If you want to talk about it, the Labour Party were just as involved in that as the Conservative Party. If you want to talk about the future, if you come from my community, the Black community, often people used to, not anymore, talk about Enoch Powell and the Rivers of Blood speech. But if you look into these things, so Enoch Powell made that speech and he was sacked, he lost his job. But nobody talks about the 11 Labour MPs who then wrote to the then Prime Minister and asked for no more Black people to be allowed to come to the country. They were talking about West Indian people in particular. My point being, the checkered past that this country has had needs to be looked at. But there's other great things that this country has done. Won the Second World War. And for people of colour, losing the Second World War to the Nazis would have been very, very bad for us in the long run. So taking those things on are very, very important. And when you look to the modern Conservative Party, it hasn't been perfect. There's been lots of things that the party could have done better. But man, is it changing and it's forging forward and there's things to be done. And if you compare us to the Labour Party, which is obviously the direct analogue, let's see what they're doing. I mean, we've had 2 female prime ministers. They haven't even had a female leader. We've had our current our current chancellor, is of Indian origin. You know, we've had lots of people in the party. Priti Patel, one of my close supporters, of course, of Indian origin as well. These things in our party are the norm now. We have the Conservative Friends of India, Conservative Friends of Israel, Conservative Friends of the Caribbean, Conservative Friends of Nigeria, and there'll be some people who were upset because I've missed them out. We have the Conservative Muslim Forum, and all of these things are important because they're forces in the party that bring new candidates forward, that change the look and the welcoming nature of the party, but more importantly, give the party a different lived experience. The experience I've had, you would argue, isn't the same for most Conservatives as people view it. but now my experiences within the party, and it's something we talk about, learn from, represent. The most important thing about me running for Mayor of London is the fact that I was selected by Conservative members, and they had a choice. They absolutely had a choice, and they chose me. And why that's important, because it shows a change in the feeling of the membership of the party. And I think those things are really, really important. And when it comes to history, I don't think we should whitewash the history. Some of the history has been good, some of it's been very, very bad. We need to keep it all. My children will never know about slavery if we hide that history away. It needs to be there. We need to confront it, and that would be my take on moving the whole country forward, not just the Conservative Party.
I get that point. We need to say as it is and not hide and whitewash facts, which would obviously lead to problems in the future. Shaun, you've been actively campaigning, and I've seen that been in some of the forums where you've been campaigning. So you've been doing the hard work, a lot more visible than I would say Sadiq Khan or mayoral candidate from other parties. So definitely you're a lot more motivated. I would like to know three key things, three key pointers, three key highlights in your campaign, which you think is going to change how London operates, and why those three pointers or 3 points are important.
I would say number one has to be the fresh start I want to give London when it comes to dealing with crime. So recently, we've had so many murders in London. We've had 2 record years in a row for homicide in London. Since Sadiq Khan has become mayor, robbery has risen by 80%, knife crime has risen by 60%. Sadiq Khan himself has failed so much that even he said, these words came from his own mouth, that London is no longer safe for women and girls. That's the responsibility of the mayor. So I want to give London a fresh start by putting 8,000 police officers on the street extra, and asking those police officers to patrol so our communities are safe. So communities that are not under pressure, it's criminals who are under pressure. I also want to buy the police the correct technology so they can scan and search people, they can stop and search people, they can prevent burglaries. All of these things are important. The second thing I want to do is give a really big boost, a really fresh start to housing in London. So I want to build 100,000 homes for £100,000. If you look into our communities came here to thrive. And one of the big things about working and moving forward is owning your own property. 87% of Londoners say they want to buy in London. Sadiq Khan has not built those homes. He's only built 16,000 homes in a 5-year period that people could buy. I want to build 100,000 homes, because if you come from a community like mine, moving forward means you'd like to own. And also it's cheaper than rent. So that's why I want to do it, 100,000 homes for £100,000. The last big thing is twofold. One is to make sure we get business going in London, because without that business, we have no employment, and we need employment to make our families safe. We need a strong regular income to raise our families. And the second piece is we need to make sure transport works properly in London, because it's a big part of staff moving around and customers moving around. So what I'm going to do is start a London infrastructure bank. I'm going to raise £10.9 billion to spend on the infrastructure of London, mostly the infrastructure of transport for London. And the second reason this is important, I have an economic plan for London that will drive 924,000 jobs. And of course, that £10.9 billion is a very big part of that. The point is this: London's best days are ahead of it if we have new leadership, if we give London a fresh start. I think we can make London the best place in the world, but we must change direction now.
Okay, Shaun, we're going to go for a break. Once we are back, I would like to put across the Labour perspective, which is currently that there's more crime. They're not able to put enough police or enough policing on the streets of London because the funding has been cut by the Conservative government. So, I mean, that would be their point of view. And playing the devil's advocate, I would like to push that and talk to you just after the break. Thank you.
Thank you.
Viewers, welcome back. We're talking with Shaun Bailey, the mayoral candidate from Conservative Party. He's here with us today, and we're discussing London with him and his plans for London. Shaun, before we went into the break, you were talking about your number one priority, and that is to make our streets safe and to fight with the menace of knife crime and other similar issues. And you said that you want to bring more police. I think you said something like 8,000 more police on London
That's
streets.
correct.
And as I said to you earlier, my argument would be, isn't the Conservative Party at the helm of affairs in the nation? We have a Conservative government, and Labour would definitely argue that they're not able to do more or they're not able to do enough because somewhere their hands are tied and they're not getting enough support from the government, or to put it more bluntly, they're not getting the money, they're not getting enough funding. Would you agree with that? Do you think this is not necessarily a failing of the current mayor, rather a failing of politics? What do you say?
I would say this: the previous mayor had less police officers than Sadiq Khan started with and had much, much lower crime. He'd cut the homicide rate in half, and our current mayor has had 2 record years in a row for homicide. And if it was only about funding and not about a failure of leadership, Sadiq Khan would be able to explain that one of his first acts as becoming Mayor of London was to remove £38 million from the police staffing budget that was left there by the previous mayor. It was there in the budget, and Sadiq Khan decided to take that money away. He then went on to say it'll take 10 years to solve knife crime in London. And what he did by that, I believe, is say to criminals, you have free reign to do as you want. And he made young people feel like they have to arm themselves to be defended from these criminals. The problem here in London is twofold. Under Sadiq Khan, crime has evolved, it hasn't been solved. And the reason that's happened is because Sadiq Khan won't take responsibility. Just the other day, he said that London is not safe for women and girls, the streets of London. But that's his job to make those streets safe. So while there certainly has been funding challenges in the police, there's no denying they've had some of their funds cut. The mayor cut even more of those funds. I will make the savings at City Hall to provide extra 8,000 police officers on the streets of London. If you put in stark contrast with Sadiq, he has failed. He has grown the number of PR officers he has. He hasn't grown the number of police officers he has. His own staff budget has risen by 80%. 80%, whilst he threatened to take £105 million away from the police staffing budget the second time he would have removed money from that budget. London needs a fresh start in the way it thinks about policing. And the first thing is a mayor who takes responsibility for the police force in London. Remember, the mayor of London is the police commissioner for London. He is in charge of policing. He has complete budgetary control. He has the duty to deliver on that as well. And it's now we need a mayor who takes that responsibility seriously.
And what do you say to the current incident which has happened, where it seems, as per the news reports, that the police officer is in docks for the incident which happened with the lady, with Sarah? That's really unfortunate, and I don't know what to say. I mean, you saying that bring more police, and this is something which is going contrary. So is there something sinister here, something wrong here?
I mean, I can't comment on an ongoing case. Of course, someone has been charged and he is a serving police officer, and the police and the judicial system will get to the bottom of that. But the tragic incident of Sarah's murder and the pain her family must be feeling is a separate issue to how we police in London. And that who's in charge of the police, whose job it is to keep your children safe and my children safe, is the mayor. And by his own admission, he has failed. And we can't wait for someone to figure out what to do. We need a plan like mine. I will bring 8,000 extra police officers onto the street. I will give 4,000 youth workers across London to help young people stay out of crime. 32 youth zones for young people to come, congregate, have a good time, be looked after. I'll spend money from the adult education budget, making sure those young people have access to in-work training so they can move into work, they can become citizens. This is how we fight crime. But it first starts with proper stop and search. It first starts with 8,000 extra police officers because I want to keep you safe. your family. You must be able to go to work and not look over your shoulder. You must be able to, I don't know, open your garage and not fear someone's going to run in behind you. You must know that when your daughter, your wife, your neighbor is on the transport system, that they are safe. And by our current mayor's own admission, that is not the case. I want to turn that around. I want to give London a fresh start.
All right, Shaun. So we'll take your number one priority to make London safe again, and that's I think coming out very strongly as your focus as one of your major areas of policy change or a policy shift to ensure that safety is withheld. I mean, for Londoners, that safety is brought back again. So I hope you get the chance to implement that. Wish you very best for that. Shaun, moving on, I had heard these comments earlier, and these were from detractors of Conservative Party, and there were things said like that. Look, Conservative Party has pitched someone because here is an Asian. He's a mayor from an Asian background, so as a political move, there's someone who comes from a black origin or a man of color who's kind of pitched against it. This was in the initial stages, and I think the perception has changed considerably. But in the initial stages, this was seen like that. It was seen like, from a very different perspective, as a divisive political move to counter people from one community and with someone from a different community. Do you think there was something there, or you reckon that was just balderdash?
I think I'll use your term. I'd say it's balderdash, and I'll give you three reasons. I spoke to you earlier about the activity of different communities in the Conservative Party, Conservative Friends of the Caribbean, for instance, which of course I'm a member. My parents are Jamaican. The Nigerian Friends of the Conservative Party. Indian Friends of the Conservative Party.
Yeah.
All of this activity means that more and more people from different communities are coming through the Conservative Party. It's culminated in having two chancellors who are from non-white background, one Pakistani, one Indian, another a Home Secretary who is of Indian origin. And that's very important because they are the big offices of state, the biggest offices of state. And here we are now. And in London, because there's so much activity in London, it's such a diverse place. It's our strength here in London, isn't it? Our diversity, the number of communities here, the outreach we have into the rest of the world because of that. Remember, that's the backdrop to which the party is operating. And I was not selected by the party. I was selected by the party members, not the party. It wasn't a prime minister. It wasn't a group of MPs. It was ordinary Conservative members who selected me, a very great deal of them. And that's important, isn't it? Because no one can accuse them of picking the black guy. They picked the guy who they thought had the best experience and the best plan for London to offer that fresh start. Remember, when you speak about me, yes, I came from a very poor background. I was a youth worker for 20 years before I came into the party. I ran a 60 plus day centre as the chair of the trustees. I've done many things in my life. I've also been special advisor to the Prime Minister. So I have a very strong CV in the political world and also the business world, the ordinary world. And these two things came together. And my fellow party members decided that I was the person to pick. Because remember, they had a choice. They had a choice between a Caucasian woman, a Caucasian man, and me. And they picked me, and to their credit. And the other thing I'd say as well, I think I've proved my point. I have been campaigning long and hard for a very long time, and I've done that to make sure I can reward the confidence that they put in me. And one of my activists said it to me yesterday evening, actually. She said, I think you were the right choice. I voted for you, Shaun. And she said, the 2.5 years you've spent campaigning for this role, remembering normally you campaign for this role for about 3 months, she said, shows me that you're a seasoned campaigner. And why I tell you that story, she never talked about the fact that I'm black. She never talked about the fact that I'm a man or that I'm a parent. She talked about the fact that I'm a campaigner. And that's the thing I bring to this. I bring a fresh campaign to give London a fresh start.
No, great, Shaun. But in my own experience as a journalist, as a person in public life, and as a media person, I've seen there has been a historical divide between the Asian communities and the black communities. Uh, and it's unfortunate. It's really unfortunate, but that's how it has been. And I really hope that someone like you can or makes an effort, makes a positive impact on that, and tries to bridge this divide between communities and plays that role in politics, which is positive. Shaun, coming back,
Let me just say,
yeah,
let me say that's so important. And early on in the campaign, I went to the back Vedanta temple, and I remember one of the elders there spoke to me, and we spoke
yeah.
about our spirituality because I'd become a Christian, and he really touched my soul on how we can bring our communities together. Because you're right to identify that, but part of my role and why I've been so active in the Indian community is to make sure that we can heal that division. I really do think we can. Both of our communities have a lot to teach each other, and I'd like to do that. And when I go around London, for instance, I was in the Kingsbury Temple as a vaccinated. I'm a volunteer for the vaccination program. It was really great to tweet out and show people from my community the activity of your community because people appreciate that and how your community is reaching out to everyone. And that's what I hope that I can do on the biggest scale by being the mayor of London.
No, definitely. And I think there's a menace of racism across communities. I mean, it's a different kind of racism within Asian communities, something which some other day I would like to talk about and discuss, but maybe we don't have enough time today. But there are issues, deep-seated issues. And someone like you definitely can make a huge impact and close this divide and bring communities together. Shaun, moving on from politics, I would like to talk about your family and upbringing. You did say that you had single mom parentage, and what were those things? What were those from your experience of growing up, which you think are invaluable and which gives you strength? I'm sure you had lots of challenges as well, and part of your challenge was as a young man, you have struggled and you've overcome. So, what exactly is there in your growing up, and would you like to talk about that?
Thank you. I would say the big things are family. I was raised by my single mother, but I come from a big family. And when you talk about bringing our communities together, I think one of the start points that we should share, we are very family oriented communities. I was effectively raised by the women in my community and of my mother's and my grandmother's age, and they fed us and they clothed us and they helped us with school and they just kept us going, and that was a real thing for us. And that experience showed me the importance of community because you learn community because of your family, and I enjoyed that part of my experience. My childhood was very very poor, but also very very happy. I had my brother, I had my mother, and we were in a big strong community. Where life became really tough is I spent a long time avoiding gangs and crime. There's a lot of crime in my area and a lot of drug use in particular. And I'm just not, I've always hated drug use. I just think it destroys people and communities. So I worked hard to get away from that. My mum pushed me through school. She pushed me into Army Cadets. So I had something positive to do, and which was a real great outlet for me. It's a real great time in my life. I'm currently now a honorary colonel in the Royal Regiment of Fusiliers because of my activity in the Army Cadets and because of my community work. And I bring that experience to the regiment and help them develop soldiers, help them develop policy to move forward. But the big thing about my young life, particularly my late teens and early 20s, is the fact that I was unemployed for a long time. So when people say to me, why do you talk about business so much? Why are you always trying to help businessmen? It's because businessmen, businesswomen, they provide employment. And if you want a community to recover from poverty, they need good employment. They need access to education. They need good employment. That's why you always hear me about supporting business. That's why you hear me talking about my deputy mayor for business, my deputy mayor for international trade. It's why I keep telling people I will run trade missions to India, to I don't know, to America, to everywhere. I just want to get London out on the world scene because it's business that we can bring back here that will feed our families. And the other reason you hear me talking about 100,000 homes for £100,000 so much is because I was homeless for a long time. And it's hard in a way that sometimes words fail me. And anybody who's watching this now who's a parent, will know they work long, hard hours to make sure they have a nest for their children, for their family to thrive. And when you can't keep your children in that way, it's distressing for everyone. So I really, really want people to have their own homes. And my growing up and experiences I had, avoiding crime, being unemployed, being homeless, those things motivate my politics. My politics is about people. I want people to thrive. I want people to have an income, and I want people to be safe.
Sure, Shaun, that's well received. We get your message. We're shortly going to have a break, and we'll be back again to talk to Shaun Bailey, who's the mayoral candidate from the Conservative Party and who's standing for mayoral elections very soon. Thank you very much. We have with us Shaun Bailey, the mayoral candidate from the Conservative Party standing for London elections. We had a very insightful discussion with him, and we must say that he's quite passionate. He's passionate for London, and he possibly will make a difference. Shaun, welcome back to the show.
Thank you.
Shaun, before we went in the break, we did discuss your views on London policing, your views on crime, and how you want to control that, how you want to make a difference on that front. But somewhere I was hoping to hear from you a different view, something a bit more radical. You have gone through a phase in your life when you were up against a lot of challenges. By your own admission, you faced situations which were not conducive, and you've seen from very close quarters what we call the fate of disenfranchised youth. The fate with a lot of people from black or Asian backgrounds face, especially those who don't come from privileged backgrounds, people who have come through, bare minimum wages, or whose families have not been able to support them fully, or who have lived in council homes. So you have seen that from close quarters, and you've seen the attitude. You've seen how somewhere within those communities, and I've seen it firsthand as well, there's this kind of attitude which is what we can call anti-establishment. They don't want to toe the line. They don't want to follow the rules, and it's some kind of an emotional repressed anger against the system. And they don't do crime necessarily because they want money or gains out of it. Sometimes it is done in the spirit because they want to be part of this rebellious gang. They want to be part of this anti-establishment. And by your own admission, you said that you have committed or done things which you're possibly not happy about. Maybe I read somewhere that you said at some point of time you were part of a gang or some kind of thing at that moment which you might have felt right about in that situation, and you turned your life around. You were lucky, you were fortunate enough, you had the right kind of values to make a difference and to be here today, standing up for one of the topmost posts. But don't you feel there's an alternate view? There's something else which needs to be done, and something which just can't be tackled by policing and the same model which the communists tried.
You're 100% right. But that's why in my first answer, you heard me talk about two important things. One, a second chance fund, and that's about getting those young people who are on that carousel, like conveyor belt, in and out of prison, in and out, in and out. It's about breaking that cycle. It's about giving them a fresh start by getting them work preparedness training, by getting them vocational training or academic training, whatever they need. We need to target them and focus on them and say to them two things. Here's an opportunity for you, and it's your responsibility to take it up. We cannot make you successful. Only you can make you successful. We can support you if you do the right thing. Here's access to that training. It's very, very important that we do that, because the wider pieces as well, we need to talk to parents and help parents understand the pressures that their children are growing up in, so they can support them in a more modern way, the way they need supporting. And also we need to talk to people about their responsibility. Just 3 days ago now, I was with a woman that I've known for a long time called Yasna Badzak, whose son was murdered less than a month ago now. And he was an excellent young man. Sven was the best kind of young man, went to university, polite, and just a wonderful young man. And he was murdered by people who clearly are the kind of people you're talking about. How do we make sure that doesn't happen in London? How do we make that break? We have part of it is saying to people, it's a personal responsibility. One of the things about coming from my poor background, I don't use that. I don't want to let people use that as an excuse to behave badly. Most people come from a poor background. All they do is work hard, excuse me, and try to make ends meet. Anybody who commits crime and says they've had a hard upbringing, I won't hear that. And why I'm telling you that story and those two things is to help make the change in people's minds in London. Yes, we must support our young people to do the right thing, but also there's a responsibility piece for them and their parents as well to take away. We need people to act responsibly. And the other thing about crime in London is that we need leadership. If we're going to face down the horrific amount of crime we've had, remember a mayor who said that London is no longer safe. The streets of London are no longer safe for women and girls. We need a mayor who steps up to responsibilities and says, it's my job to make it safe. And that's why I say the things I say. I remember I've talked about a big spread of things. 100,000 homes. I've talked about 8,000 extra police officers, 4,000 youth workers. Why? Because this is the big sweep of social things we want to happen. Why did I talk about business? There's business men and women watching this now, right, who've worked so hard to build their business. And one of the things I can guarantee you they'll be most proud of is giving other people a chance. Why don't we create an environment where more people can run a business to give other people a chance? That's what I'm interested in. That's the kind of London I want to build, a London that gives people a chance to move forward.
I get that, Sean, but I was also hoping to hear that maybe we need to take a different view. Like, why do we have police officers guarding people who are selling weed? I mean, can't we change law? Can't we change the rules? Can't we make the society focus on real issues like crime, violent crime? People stabbing each other. Those kind of real serious crimes, rather than kind of taking a view where they're diluted to that point where they can not really focus on what is critical and they're spread thin. So maybe that's not your remit for now. Maybe there's a bigger policy.
Let me say this to you. So 3 days ago, I did a major speech on crime. And the three themes in that crime were to get knives off the street, to use stop and search properly. But the third theme was to back the police politically so they could do what they feel is necessary to clean up the crime epidemic we're having in London. I feel that's what you're alluding to. The reason I haven't come out and said that, because anybody who knows me knows that I'm tough on crime. Anybody who knows me knows that I will support the police to get this done. And that's the backdrop to all of my comments on crime. The only point I want to make is, yes, we'll be tough on the streets, but we can't arrest our way out of this problem. We do have to provide opportunity as well. And sometimes people talk too much about one or the other. I'm going to do both. I have a plan to give London a fresh start, and I'm going to do both. I'm going to be tough on crime, but I'm also going to support young people to do the right thing.
Sean, the other thing which I was going to ask you, you've been talking about congestion charge, and somewhere inside me, I feel I support the mayor for bringing the congestion charge, because London is congested. I mean, it took me 1.5 hours today to come here from where I live to the studios. I mean, it's that kind of traffic everywhere. And somewhere I feel that, yes, for a greener London, for a cleaner London, maybe we just need to ensure that the public transport is stronger, is more easily accessible. We make more investment in that, and we need to cut down on cars. We need to make it difficult for people, or rather pay more to get into central London. It might be not a very popular thing to do, but somewhere I feel, yes, there has to be something else, because you can't live in this city with so much traffic, with so many cars. There has to be a radical thinking about it
Let,
as well.
let me say this to you, but you used the word thinking, didn't you? And the mayor has done no thinking. Let's be clear. The traffic in London has a lot to do with the fact that Hammersmith Bridge is closed, London Bridge is down to one lane, Vauxhall Bridge is down to one lane. It's all decisions Sadiq Khan has made that has slowed the traffic down in London. There's low traffic neighbourhoods in the wrong place. There's cycle lanes in the wrong place. That's why the traffic is slow in London. It's not slow because it's the only thing people will do is drive. It's because the mayor has closed down the roads with so many roadworks, so many cycle lanes, etc. That's one thing. Secondly, it's full of cars, if it is, because people are afraid to travel on the tube. Again, the mayor, mixed messages. Sadiq Khan said one day it's safe to travel on the tube. The next day he said, no, it's not safe to travel on the tube. People don't know what to do, so they get in their car when they could use public transport. That's where the traffic's come from. And when you talk about congestion charges, two things you should know. It wasn't Sadiq Khan's idea to have the ultra low emission zone. That was a previous mayor. And Sadiq talks about it, his idea it wasn't. What Sadiq Khan's idea is to expand the ultra low emission zone all the way to the north and south circular. That will cost us at least £130 million of your money. It's the wrong thing to do. If we want to get cars off the road, we need to follow my plan. And it's simple. Firstly, we have proper public transport that runs. That's why you hear me talk about 10 billion to invest in the infrastructure. Two, we give people an alternative. We must have more car clubs in London so that people don't have to buy a car. People who occasionally need a car can join the car club. Everybody else just don't have a car, especially if you live towards the middle of London. But the mayor is not supporting these things. Thirdly, if people can jump in and out of cabs more easily, then they won't need a car. They won't buy a car. Cab costs will come down and they will do that. So you'll have less cars on the road. Let's do nighttime deliveries, because in order to have economic activity in London, there will be traffic on the roads. Let's use the roads properly. Let's use some of it at night where it's appropriate. What we do now, we have this big asset that we only use for less than half the day. Let's do this properly. And the other thing we must not do, Sadiq Khan has expanded the congestion charge. That is killing business. It is a worship tax. People going to church, going to good God, going to mosque, can't organise their community because now they have to pay congestion charge. I will wind that back. It's unfair. And it's going to bring in that outer London border tax. Anybody driving into London will have to pay £5.50. What effect do you think that will have on the cost of living in London? What effect do you think that will have on family? All of these things are wrong. And why Sadiq Khan is doing it is because he's run TfL's finances into the floor and he's passing the cost directly onto you, directly onto Londoners. I think it's
Sean,
wrong. It's time to such approach.
Sean, we are coming to the end of the show. I would say that what is your final message for Londoners in the post-Brexit and hopefully post-pandemic world? What is your final message for the inhabitants of the city?
I would say London needs a fresh start. Sadiq Khan has failed in every area, from transport to housing to safety. If you want that fresh start, please register to vote and please support me. I have a plan to make sure our families are safe, our families have an income, and London is a clean, pleasant place to live. London needs a fresh start. My name is Shaun Bailey, and I'm the fresh start that London needs.
Sean, last words, non-political message. That was a political message, non-political message. What you would say?
Enjoy your time. I know lockdown has been hard and separated us from our wider family, but I'd say look after your health, look after the health of your children, look after everybody's mental health. We're coming to the end of lockdown, hopefully, and we can all get back to some sense of normality. Please do try to keep your children motivated in school. That's been hard for me. Homeschooling is hard, but just stay safe. Having the vaccination, keeping our community safe is our number one priority, because people have put out a lot of false information to our communities, and we must fight back against that information, and we must make sure we protect our children and our grandparents by getting the vaccination, everybody.
Thank you, Sean. That was Shaun Bailey in my show today. Shaun Bailey, who's tending to be the future mayor who's contesting to be the future mayor of this great city of London, and from the Conservative Party. So, Shaun, thanks very much for being on the show today. Your message has been well received. You've been quite passionate and persuasive, and I hope that you make a difference in politics of the city of Great Britain. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Viewers, thank you very much for being here.